When Judge Ortega looked up and whispered, "It's her," the entire courtroom fell silent. The drop of a fountain pen echoed like an explosion in the stillness. The young clerk froze mid-sentence. Karamie's daughter turned sharply, eyes wide with shock. Brent, her husband, frowned, confused. And I just sat there, hands clasped together, steadying my breath. No one in that room, not even my daughter, knew why the judge's face trembled as if he had just seen a ghost from his past. No one knew that 30 years ago, when he was just a ridiculed intern, I was the only one who defended him before the entire court council. And no one knew that today, that same man was holding the scales of justice in my case. They will know, just not yet. Kara gripped Brent's hand, the man who had turned my life upside down in a single year. He leaned over and whispered something into her ear. They both laughed softly, but loud enough for a mother to hear. A laugh that froze my heart and cracked open memories I thought I had sealed behind old walls. I am Elaine Tran, 69 years old, a widow, and once a court clerk in Monterey County for nearly 20 years. Before everything collapsed, I was just an ordinary woman living in Pacific Grove, making coffee in a chipped porcelain mug every morning, watering the blue hydrangeas my late husband planted, and watching sea fog roll across the neighbors' roofs. A quiet life, small and steady, measured by the ticking of the wall clock. I used to believe that was enough until one dinner changed everything. That night, I cooked Kara's favorite dish, chicken, and the same one I used to make whenever she felt sad as a child. I set the table with the embroidered cloth from her high school days and placed a jar of white baby's breath in the center. The kitchen smelled of chicken and caramelized the scent of memory, of the days when mother and daughter still leaned on each other to survive. When the door opened, Brent came in first. No greeting, no glance, just tossed his keys on the counter and sank into Mr. Tran's armchair, one I still polished every week like a ritual. Kara followed, wearing a teal silk dress, her hair tied up, her eyes distant and cold. "Mom, we need to talk." Her voice was flat, like she was reading a report. I wiped my hands and smiled. "Sit down, honey. I made your favorite." She didn't sit. "This house is too big for you now. You can't live alone forever. Brent and I found a great place for you, Seaside Haven in Marina. There are nurses, gardens, and bingo on Tuesdays." I froze. "What did you just say?" Kara took a breath, avoiding my gaze. "You'll be happier there. And this house, we need more space." I looked around the room, the same floor where Kara took her first steps, the same walls where Mr. Tran held my hand as he drew his last breath. Every mark of paint, every corner carried love, now treated like an item for sale. "This is my home, Kara. It's ours. Memories live in your heart, not on the walls, Mom." Her voice was so cold I could hear the small sound of something breaking inside me. Brent looked up from his phone, smirking. "Don't worry, Mom. We'll handle all the paperwork. The appraiser's coming next week. You just need to sign." I asked quietly. "Sign what?" "The transfer," he said simply. "Because you can't manage this house anymore. We're just helping you." "Helping me by taking my home?" The question slipped out, small but sharp enough to freeze the air. Brent smiled at someone already winning. "You're misunderstanding. This is for your own good." I said nothing more. They left, leaving the dinner cold, the flowers drooping, and the last warmth in the kitchen fading away. I sat there for a long time, listening to the ticking clock, to the sound of my own heart shrinking. That night, I opened the cabinet of old documents, searching for Mr. Tran's file, the wooden one he once told me. "Don't open it unless you truly need to." For the first time, I felt that I truly did. This morning, walking into the courthouse, I knew it was no longer a place for other people's cases. It was where I would reclaim what was mine, not just a house, but the dignity of a mother dismissed. And when Judge Ortega looked at me, his eyes no longer belonged to a stranger. I saw memory in them, recognition, and perhaps justice quietly tipping toward my side. 30 years ago, I saved a young intern from losing his job over a small mistake. Today, that man holds the scales of justice. And only he knows I am not the frail woman they think I am. If you've ever been dismissed, sidelined, or silenced simply because of your age or quietness, remember this: sometimes justice just waits for the right moment to return. Where are you listening from today? Leave a comment and subscribe to hear the next chapter of Begin Again Stories, because you are not finished. And no one has the right to take away your voice and call it love. I once heard someone say, "Some dinners don't end with dessert, but with the breaking of a family." Now I believe it. After they left, the kitchen still smelled of simmered chicken and fried shallots, but the warmth was gone. Candle wax dripped onto the tablecloth like drops of Timeslow, heavy, impossible to wipe away. 2 plates remained spotless on the table. No one touched their chopsticks. No one touched the meal I had spent the afternoon preparing. Everything in the room, the armchair, the vase, the wedding photos, seemed to look at me with the gaze of a witness to a cruel truth. Even family love has an expiration date. I sat there for a long time, listening to the ticking clock blend with the distant sound of waves. Each beat pressed down the same question: where did I go wrong? I used to think that if I loved my child enough, she would never turn away. I used to believe that if I endured a little longer, my daughter would understand. But I forget that sacrifice, when stretched too far without being valued, becomes suffocating. Perhaps in Kara's eyes, I am no longer a mother, just an old house blocking the path to her new life. I walked into the living room and sat in Mr. Tran's, the same one Brent had sat in so casually, as if claiming territory. For the first time, the chair no longer carried my husband's warmth, only the chill of insult. I opened a drawer and pulled out an old photo album. Inside, Kara at 6 sat on her father's shoulders, holding a balloon, laughing with eyes closed. Another photo showed her at graduation, clutching a bouquet I'd bought with my evening shift wages. And another was taken on the day she announced her engagement. In that frame, I stood behind her, smiling softly, while Brent faced the camera with the confident smile of a man who had won both the bride and the life behind her. I whispered to the man in the photo, "My love, did we raise her too well, so well that she believes nothing can hurt her mother anymore?" That night, I made myself a cup of peppermint tea, the only habit that still helps me breathe. The tea cooled, its steam fading into the dark. In the silence, I heard something strange. The ticking clock in the house seemed to change rhythm, no longer steady, but urgent, as if urging me to do something. I stood up. My hand, almost by instinct, touched the door of Mr. Tran's study. I had left that room untouched since the day he passed papers, a typewriter, and an oak filing cabinet. On the desk still lay his Mont Blanc pen and a sheet of paper with an unfinished line. "Don't be afraid, I've taken care of it all." I never knew what he meant by taken care of money, taxes, or me. But tonight, guided by some faint instinct, I knew I had to find out. I opened the 3rd drawer. Inside, stacks of files were neatly labeled. A small wooden box, locked, sat in the bottom corner. On the lid, handwritten in ink, "E.T. for her eyes only." The key, I had seen it somewhere, perhaps in a book. I searched, and my fingers brushed the spine of The Art of Simple Living. In the middle pages, something small and bronze was clipped as a memory. I fitted into the lock. The click was soft but resounding. When the lid opened, the scent of old paper and oak blended into that unmistakable smell of memory. Inside were not love letters, nor a will as I had imagined, but sealed envelopes, each marked with the name of a company, a bank, a piece of land. I didn't understand everything, only one thing. Mr. Tran had prepared something for and no one else knew. Outside the window, fog covered the sloping road leading to the sea. Through the misted glass, I saw the neighbor's light flicker behind the only glow left in the night. I placed the documents neatly back into the box, closing the lid gently, as if sealing a chapter that had just opened. I didn't know why, but a calm settled inside me, as if he were still here, whispering, "Let them think you're weak. As long as you remember you still hold the key." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I didn't yet know what I was stepping into, but there was one feeling clear within me. The silence tonight was no longer fear. It was the beginning of a plan. Tomorrow, Kara will return with the appraiser. They think they're coming to measure this house, but they don't know they're standing on land that bears my name and mine alone. If you've ever been pushed out of the place once called home by the very person you raised, remember this: sometimes silence is the strongest answer. Because every rebirth begins on the night you thought you'd lost everything. The next morning, I woke early and made peppermint tea. Steam rose in thin trails across the window pane. I knew they would come exactly at 9, as in every email Brent sent to Kara. 3 knocks on the door. I opened it. On the porch stood Kara, her lipstick pale but her eyes avoiding mine. Brent, hands in pockets, wearing a half smile, and a stranger in a gray suit holding a laser measure. "I'm Alberta Praiser, Century Properties," he said, his tone dry. I stepped aside and let them in. The air inside felt strange, if the expensive cologne had replaced the warmth I had long protected Brent from wearing. Albert opened his folder and scanned the room. Built in 1989, 2,000 square feet, oak columns, limestone roof. I nodded. My husband designed it. I just added the trellis outside the porch. Brent cut in, "That trellis will come down. The house needs to feel open, easier to sell." I smiled. My house has always been bright. Only the people who move in make it dark. No one replied. The beeping of the laser scanner pierced the air, each sound like a needle against skin. They moved from the living room to the hallway, measuring, noting, photographing. Kara followed Albert, clipboard in hand. Occasionally, she stopped to write something, her face focused, as if erasing layers of memory. In the hallway, Albert looked up at the row of framed photos. Weddings, birthdays, Kara's graduation. "If you remove these, the wall will look brighter, giving a sense of space. Old houses with personal photos tend to feel cluttered." Kara nodded. "Yes, Mom keeps them for memories. We'll take them down when we renovate." I looked at them, not angry, just empty. The photos may be old, but without them, this house wouldn't be a home. Brent chuckled lightly. "Buyers don't buy memories, Mom. They buy walls and tiles." The words fell like a stone into a dry well, with no return. In the kitchen, Albert knelt to inspect the floor. "Tiles are old. Pipes must be leaking. I can hear it." I smiled faintly. "That's the wind, not water. I've lived here for 30 years. You've been here 3 minutes, yet you know more than I do?" Albert looked up, briefly embarrassed. Kara touched my shoulder gently. "Mom, please, he's just doing his job." "Doing his job to take my home?" I asked, my eyes fixed on Brent. He kept his voice steady. "You're misunderstanding. We just want you to live somewhere safer." "And what is safety, Brent? Being erased from your own life?" Kara bit her lip and turned away. I saw her hand trembling as she held her pen. An hour later, they finished. Brent said a few polite words and left, but Kara stayed behind. "Please don't be upset, Mom. I just want to help," I answered softly. Helping means asking before deciding for someone else, Kara, not forcing them to sign. She lowered her head. When the door closed, silence filled the house. I sat in Mr. Tran's chair. Outside, wind rustled through the trellis. A single hydrangea petal fell and touched the floor. Such a small sound, yet it tightened my chest. I looked around. The photos still hung, the late sunlight glinting off the glass, reflecting hundreds of faces, youth, smiles, and the departed. I suddenly realized that memories have their own light, one that only those who lived them can see. That night, I cleaned each frame carefully, but didn't take them down. Behind every picture, I slipped a small note, a short line. "Don't forget, these walls once knew love." When I reached the wedding photo, I lingered longer. Mr. Tran still looked at me with that same calm, knowing gaze, as if he understood everything unfolding now. On the desk, the wooden box labeled "For Her Eyes Only" still lay there. I opened it again, this time more carefully. Between the bank envelopes, I found a small folded note, handwritten, "If you're reading this, it means they're trying to take what's yours. Don't be afraid. You have more than they think." Beneath it was a copy of the will, red seal faded but clear. Beneficiary, Elaine Tran, sole owner. I read it over and over, a quiet warmth spreading through me. He had seen this coming. And just below the line, a faint, shaky note read, The rest you'll find in the safe downstairs." I folded the paper, placed it back in the box, and looked around the house. From that moment, I knew. This wasn't a battle between mother and daughter anymore. It was a confrontation between memory and ambition, between an older woman deemed weak and those who believed power was theirs to wield. I whispered to myself, as if making a vow, "Tomorrow, if they return, I'll be ready." Outside the window, the moon slipped behind the trees. Its light fell through the curtain, resting on my hand holding the willow paper thinner than any promise, yet stronger than every lie they had used to deceive me. Kara thinks she's about to sign the sale contract, but in the steel safe downstairs lie numbers that could make even their lawyer change his tone. Have you ever stayed silent so that others would think you were weak? Don't worry, silence is simply the moment when you're watching, waiting for the right time to rise. I couldn't sleep that night. The wind from Monterey Bay slipped through the cracks of the window, cold as a warning. On the table, the wooden box still lay open, revealing the note that read, "The rest you'll find in the safe downstairs." I hadn't opened that basement in years. Since the day Mr. Tran passed away, I had locked it, burying half my life with it. But when people force you to leave your own home, every sealed door inside you begins to open. I took the flashlight and walked down the wooden stairs. Each step echoed, dust falling like memories peeling from the walls. The basement smelled of rust and old paper. In the far corner stood a moss-green steel. Safe, heavy, silent, its lock corroded with time. I touched it. The thick layer of dust felt like an unread vow. I searched for the key in the old drawer beneath the box of screws he used to keep. When I turned it in the lock, the click rang out dry but sharp, like the heartbeat of someone waking from a long sleep. The door opened. Inside was a stack of thick folders, each envelope labeled neatly in his familiar handwriting. I pulled out the first one. The logo of Seabright Holdings, a major real estate firm in the area. The second was a share certificate, Mr. Tran's name listed under major shareholder. Then came property deeds, bank accounts, stocks bearing his signature, all marked Beneficiary, Elaine Tran. My hands trembled so hard I had to sit down on the floor. The pages fell like old wings fluttering back. All this time he had been quietly building, saving, creating a world of security around me, and never said a word. I reached the final envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter, the ink faded, the corners slightly burned, perhaps by candlelight. The first line stole my breath. "My dear Elaine, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer by your side." I held the letter, my fingers shaking. "I know you'll wrestle with loneliness and the feeling of being forgotten. You've always put others first, our daughter, the house, your work, and never kept anything for yourself. But I've seen what you don't, that those who are too kind are often mistaken for being weak. I don't want, once I'm gone, for anyone at all, to make you lose what's yours." A tear fell, soaking into the ink. "I left all this to you, not just so you'd be safe, but so you'd be free. You don't need anyone's signature for the right to live your own life. And if one day they try to make you believe you have nothing left, open this safe and remember, you're the one who holds every key." I folded the letter between my palms as if holding his soul. It wasn't the money that made me cry. It was the way he had understood me down to the bone, even in the fragility I never dared to admit. I sat there for a long time, listening to the wind hiss beyond the door. Memories surfaced. The nights he came home late from work and still brought me a cup of hot cocoa. The times he said, "I have a small plan. Don't worry." I used to think those were just comforting words from a man afraid of seeing his wife sad. I never knew they were the gentlest prophecy. I gathered all the papers, placed them into a leather bag, and carried them upstairs. On the table, under the lamp, the numbers, assets, shares, accounts glimmered. But what shone brightest was the return of my dignity. The next morning, Brent came back, unannounced. The door swung open, and he walked in with the confidence of a man who believed the game was already won. "Good morning, Mom. I came by so we can sign the papers. The sooner we finish, the sooner you can move to Seaside Haven." I poured tea slowly. "Would you like some tea, Brent?" "No need, Mom. I brought the contract. Just need your signature." He opened his briefcase, pulled out a folder, and slid it toward me. I didn't look at it. I just said, "Brent, do you know who this house belongs to?" He smirked. "Who else but you? But you already agreed to let us have it." I tilted my head slightly, my eyes meeting his, my voice calm. "No, Brent. This house and the apartment you're living in both belong to me. They have for years." The smile on his face faltered. What did you just say?" he stammered. I set the teacup down and took out the will, the one with the red seal. "My husband arranged everything. The apartment you live in is part of a building under my name. And if you'd like, I can send a copy of this to the management office." He froze, staring at the paper, as if looking into an abyss. "That's impossible. You're lying." I replied softly, "You can verify it. My name is printed clearly on the ownership register. I just never said anything because there was no need. But now, it seems the time has come." He muttered something under his breath and left. I stayed seated, looking at the will in my hands, feeling no triumph, only the kind that comes when justice finally begins to move. That evening, Kara called. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Mom, Brent says you made it all up. Is it true that—" "It's all true, Kara," I interrupted. "Your father left everything, and he taught me something important. Never let anyone else write your ending." Silence on the other end, then a sigh. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything, Kara. Just remember I'm still here, and this house is still open to you if you choose to walk in with the truth." I hung up, stood by the window, and opened it. Outside, the streetlights cast gold over the porch, the breeze carrying the scent of hydrangeas. I looked up at the sky and whispered, "My love." I opened the lock. "And you were right, they never knew how much I truly had. Tomorrow, my lawyer will contact the bank, and then they'll understand I'm no longer the woman who just makes tea and waits for someone's pity." Sometimes, strength doesn't come from shouting. It comes from the hand that knows which lock to open. Have you ever uncovered a truth that made you rise stronger than before? Share it with us below, because real justice begins the moment you stop being afraid of yourself. Monday morning, Monterey was still. The sea was as blue as untouched glass. I brewed tea and carefully arranged the papers. Mr. Blang's, "You are denoued and Denise." Tran had left. Share certificates, ownership documents, even the handwritten letter now pressed between 2 sheets of mica. Everything was ready for my appointment with my lawyer, Victoria Lamb. I first met her 3 years ago when transferring accounts after Mr. Tran passed away. A woman in her early 40s, with sharp eyes, voice clear and precise as a fine blade. When I called her last night, I said simply, "Victoria, I need to verify some documents. It might turn into something big." She answered without hesitation, "I'll have everything ready. See you at 9. Her office was on the 11th floor of a building overlooking the harbor. When I arrived, she was already waiting, her desk covered with files. "Mrs. Elaine, I've reviewed the copies you sent. Frankly, this is a substantial portfolio. Mr. Tran was a very meticulous man." I nodded slightly. I had no idea about these investments. All these years, I lived on my pension and a few savings. He left everything to me and never said a word. Victoria smiled. Sometimes people who truly love don't talk. They prepare. She opened the folder and pointed to a line. "See this entry? Seabright Holdings, major shareholder. This gives you controlling shares. You have voting rights in projects and the power to delegate." And here, she flipped to another page. "The ownership certificate for the Bayview Residences building, where your daughter lives. All in your name." I clenched my hands, trying to stay calm. "So, Kara's apartment is mine too? Not just the apartment, the whole building. And the rent payments from residents have been transferred into an account under your name for the past 2 years. You didn't know?" I let out a dry laugh. "No. I thought I was just a widow with a few flower pots and an old porcelain teacup." Victoria studied me for a moment. "Then now you're the woman who can decide the fate of those who look down on you." I stayed silent. Inside me, part of me trembled, the other part was terrifyingly calm. "Victoria," I said, "I don't want revenge. I just want them to understand I'm not someone they can step on." She nodded. "Understood. We'll do everything legally and properly. But sometimes justice needs to be heard loud and clear. That afternoon I returned home. On the way, I saw a familiar black car parked by the gate, Brent's. He was talking on the phone, voice raised, impatient. I got out and opened the gate. He startled. "Mom, I just came to talk." "Good, come in. We have a lot to discuss." He hesitated, then stepped inside. The late light of the day streamed through the window, glinting off his gray suit, which revealed rather than flattered. "You know," I began, "this morning I met with my lawyer. She confirmed that everything your father-in-law left was legally binding. And there's something interesting. The account you've been using to pay the rent on your apartment funds actually came from my assets." Brent froze, then laughed, hollow and forced. "You think a few pieces of paper can scare me? I told Kara you're getting confused. You need rest." I looked him straight in the eyes. "If I'm confused, how do I remember the exact bank code you use, or the business license number of the company you've been avoiding taxes with?" His face went pale. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about how my husband, your father-in-law, invested in the company you work for, and now the shareholder with voting power is me." Brent swallowed hard. "You're joking." "I never joke, Brent, but I do have one habit. I don't repeat myself." He stood, ready to leave, but I continued. "Oh, one more thing. Starting today, my lawyer will work directly with the bank. If there's any sign of falsified transactions involving this house, the first person under investigation will be you." Brent turned, fury in his eyes. "You wouldn't dare." I smiled. "Not wouldn't, will." His fists tightened and he spat out, "You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Oh, I do," I replied calmly. "A man terrified of losing something he never deserved." He stormed out, the car door slamming so hard the window panes shook. I stood there watching him leave, not trembling, only lighter. For the first time in months, I could hear the wind through the porch, sounding like freedom returning. That night, Kara called. Her voice was tired, tangled. "Mom, Brent says you threatened to sue us. Is that true?" "I'm simply protecting what's mine. But if this comes out, Brent could lose his job." I paused. "Then he should have thought of that before trying to take my house." On the other end, Kara's voice broke. "Mom, I don't know whose side to take." I exhaled softly. "You don't need to take sides, Kara. Just stand with the truth." The line went quiet. Only the sound of distant waves remained, steady, like a heartbeat calming my own. Later that night, I sat by the window and reopened Mr. Tran's letter. "You don't need anyone's signature for the right to live your life." I read that line over and over until the lights in the house dimmed. Out there, Brent might be raging, Kara might be crying, but inside me it was quiet, like the sea after a storm. Tomorrow, Victoria and I will begin the first step of a legal counterattack. I know this battle will be long, but I also know justice, once awakened, doesn't go back to sleep easily. Tomorrow, Victoria said she'll file the ownership confirmation with the court. And I wonder when my son-in-law receives the official notice, will he still have that calm smile? Some battles don't require shouting, only that you stand tall, sign your name, and let the truth speak for itself. If you've ever had to stand up to protect what you rightfully deserve, share your story below, and stay tuned for the next episode of Begin Again Stories, where justice begins to find its voice. That morning, the Monterey sky hung low like a curtain yet to be drawn. I woke early, brewed peppermint tea, and watched the steam dissolve into the soft blue light outside the window. Next to the teacup sat the folder Victoria had sent the night before, thick, heavy, bound in dark brown leather. In bold print on the top corner it read, "Property Ownership Confirmation and Preliminary Financial Fraud Report." I brushed my fingertips over the cover, the coolness spreading through my hand. These weren't just documents. They were my answer to every sneer, every lie, every humiliation of the past months. Victoria arrived at 8 sharp. She was always punctual, always carrying that faint scent of lemon perfume. "Are you ready?" she asked. I nodded. More than ever. We sat in the living room, the table covered in papers. She pulled out each sheet, her voice professional but warm. "This is the certified copy of the property deeds. This is the share certificate for Seabright Holdings." And this, she placed down the final sheet, is the detailed account statement showing the rent deposits from Kara and Brent's apartment. I looked at the long lines of numbers, my eyes blurring. Nearly $380,000 over 2 years, she continued. Monthly deposits, consistent, yet you never used a cent. Which means they've been living in an apartment you own, with money that came from you. I exhaled slowly. The world does love its twisted circles. Victoria looked at me. Today, I'll file the entire package with the Monterey County Court, along with a petition for personal asset protection. That means no one can transfer, seal, or use your name in any transaction from this point forward. I paused. And Brent? We'll send him a formal notice through legal representation. Once he receives it, he'll have to choose either to withdraw quietly or to face trial. Either way, you win. I gazed out the window, where the maple tree was shedding red leaves onto the path. Victoria, I said softly, do you ever think justice has its own rhythm? It doesn't come when we want it, but once it wakes, it breathes like a living thing. She smiled. I believe that, especially when the one speaking is you. By noon, we were driving to the Monterey courthouse. The hallways were lined with polished gray stone, the scent of fresh paper mixing with the soft echo of heels clicking like clockwork. I stood before the filing counter, my hand trembling slightly. Victoria turned to me. Would you like me to sign for you? I shook my head. No, this is my story. It has to bear my own signature. She slid the folder forward. I uncapped the pen and wrote slowly, each stroke deliberate. The ink spread across the page, forming Elaine Tran in clear, firm letters, a full stop to an old chapter. I never thought my own name, written by my own hand, could make me shake. But that's the feeling of reclaiming what was once stolen agency. The clerk took the file and pressed red seals on each sheet. Submission approved. You'll receive a court notice within 48 hours. I nodded gently, the breath leaving me light, as if years of weight had lifted from my shoulders. On the drive home, my phone rang. Kara's name appeared on the screen. I answered. Mom. Brent just got the court notice. He's furious. He says you're trying to ruin his life. I said nothing. Mom, do you really want to push things this far? No, Kara. I just want the truth to stand where it belongs. But he says he's going to countersue. He has his own lawyer now. He said if you keep going, he'll file for defamation. I laughed quietly. Usually, the guilty ones are the loudest. Kara began to cry. I don't know what to do, Mom. I spoke slowly. You don't need to do anything. Just look at who's afraid and who's calm. Silence. Then she whispered, Mom, I'm scared everything's going to fall apart. I closed my eyes. Sometimes, my dear, things have to fall apart before the truth has room to stand. That evening, Victoria called back. Elaine, I just received a rapid response from the court. They've scheduled a preliminary hearing in 10 days. And Brent just hired a rather aggressive lawyer named Thomas Greer. He's known for intimidating witnesses. My voice lowered. Then we'll prepare carefully. I've dealt with enough men who think they can scare women by raising their voices. Victoria laughed softly. I like your calm, Elaine. It frightens people more than anger ever could. I hung up and looked out onto the porch. The night sky was clear, the moon bright against the white hydrangeas in the yard. For the first time, I realized that the gentlest light doesn't come from lamps, but from confidence when you're no longer afraid of anyone. I took out Mr. Tran's letter and placed it beside the court file copy. If one day they try to make you believe you have nothing left, open this safe and remember, you're the one who holds every key. I whispered, My love, I've opened everything, and they've just begun to realize it. Cliffhanger. Tomorrow, Victoria will meet Thomas Greer in person to negotiate before the hearing. I know he'll try intimidation, like every man who thinks he can make a woman retreat with manufactured power. But this time, they're facing someone who's lost everything and has nothing left to fear. Some signatures don't just confirm ownership, they mark the moment you reclaim yourself. Have you ever signed a decision that changed your life? Share it with us, as this story steps into the courtroom and justice begins to speak in a woman's voice. I arrived at the courthouse earlier than scheduled. Monterey's air was still that morning, sunlight pale over the stone steps, and the atmosphere carried a quiet tension, like the sea holding its breath before a wave. Victoria appeared a few minutes later, in a charcoal suit, hair neatly tied back, eyes focused on the folder she carried. "Mrs. Elaine," she said softly, "today's just a preliminary meeting between both sides, but Greer never plays nice. He'll try to shake you." I smiled. "Then let him try." We entered a small conference room beside the courtroom. Fluorescent light spilled over the long wooden table, cold and sterile, leaving no space for warmth. At the head sat Thomas Greer Gray, streaked hair, tailored suit, a gleaming Patek Philippe on his wrist. His eyes measured people like property. Next to him was Brent, his face stiff, lips pressed into a tight line. He didn't look at me, just stared at his phone, but I could see the unease beneath the silence. Greer began, his voice low, gravelly, deliberate. "Mrs. Elaine, I represent Mr. Brent Walters. We're here to propose a settlement. No need to drag this to court." Victoria set the file down. "What kind of settlement, Mr. Greer?" He leaned back, smiling faintly. "Very simple. My client agrees to let you keep the Monterey house. In return, you'll transfer ownership of the Bayview residences and the Seabright Holdings shares to him. All perfectly legal, clean, and easy." I looked at him, calm. "Mr. Greer, have you ever heard the saying, when someone offers to split what was never theirs to begin with?" He raised an eyebrow. "I'm suggesting a mutually beneficial solution." "Beneficial to whom?" I replied. "I only see one side gaining." Brent cut in sharply. "Mom, I just want this over with. You're making it bigger than it is." I turned to him, voice steady as still water. "You call forging papers and pressuring someone to sign over their home a small matter?" Greer interrupted, his same polite smirk intact. "Mrs. Elaine, I advise you not to use words like forgery or coercion here. They could be considered defamatory if unproven." Victoria clasped her hands, her tone icy. "We have more than enough proof, recordings, messages, and certified bank statements. You don't need to remind us of the law." Greer glanced at her, his eyes faintly mocking. "Miss Lamb, you're young. Don't think a few documents will win your case. Courts prefer stories to numbers. And I'm very good at telling stories." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "And I, Mr. Greer, only trust what's sealed and signed." The room thickened with tension. I placed my hand on the table, speaking slowly. "Mr. Greer, I've seen plenty of people win with words, then lose to the truth. I'm not afraid of losing. I'm only afraid of silence." He tilted his head, watching me. "Mrs. Elaine, I understand you once worked as a court clerk?" I smiled faintly. "I understand how people issue gentle threats in conference rooms, if that's what you're trying to do." He leaned back, crossing his arms. "Not a threat, just reality. If you pursue this case, the local press will find out. A 69-year-old widow suing her son-in-law doesn't look good. What will the public think? That you're bitter? That you're unstable? Or that you've been manipulated?" Victoria shot up from her chair. "You're crossing a line, Greer." I raised my hand to stop her. "It's fine. Let him speak." I looked directly at Greer. "You know, I used to make coffee for the same judges you now call colleagues. I watched how they read people, and they never trusted a man wearing a watch worth more than a year's salary." The room fell silent. Brent shifted uneasily, his fingers gripping the edge of the chair. Greer nodded slowly, his smile tightening. "I'll remember that, Mrs. Tran. But remember, this court doesn't rule on feelings." "Neither do I replied. "But justice has a memory, Mr. Greer, and it usually stands with those whose voices were taken." Victoria closed the file, her tone firm. "This meeting is over. All further communication will be in writing." Outside, the air was crisp, filling my lungs like water. Victoria walked quickly, her face serious. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," I said, "but I don't think Greer's just a lawyer. He'll play dirty." She nodded. "I think so too. I just got an email." Brent filed a countersuit. He's accusing you of financial abuse and emotional manipulation of Kara." I stopped mid-hallway, my chest tightening. He dared? He probably thinks it'll scare you. Classic tactic: create public doubt, force the other side into defense. I let out a tired, steady laugh. If they want to fight, I'll show them how a woman who used to make coffee in a courthouse can read case files faster than they expect. That afternoon, I returned home. In the mailbox by the gate was a plain white envelope with no sender. Inside was a photo of me and Victoria leaving the courthouse, with a scrawled message on the back: "One more mistake, and you'll regret it." I stood still, the wind sweeping across the porch. My hands didn't shake, they only felt cold. I looked at the photo once more, then tore it in half and dropped it into the bin. "If this is how they want to play," I whispered, "then I'm not standing off the board anymore." I opened my phone and texted Victoria. "We begin phase 2. I want to bring in the secondary witness, Kara. Tomorrow, I'll call my daughter, who's been crying, afraid, standing between two sides. I don't know which she'll choose, but I know this: when truth shines bright enough, there's no place left for shadows to hide. Sometimes the strongest person in the room isn't the one who shouts, but the one who stays calm when threatened. Have you ever faced someone who tried to silence you? The next morning, fine mist hung over Monterey Bay like a gray veil. I brewed tea and set it beside my phone. The message I had sent Victoria last night contained only 7 words: "Begin phase 2, witness Kara." She replied within 3 minutes. "Agreed, but you must speak with Kara first. No pressure." I understood. No pressure. For those who have been controlled long enough, an invitation to the truth must be as gentle as a door opening by itself. I dialed my daughter's number. 3 rings. "Mom," her voice rasped, as if she'd been crying through the night. "I'll be direct," I said. "The court will ask questions. You don't need to take my side, just the side of truth." Silence. I heard a chair scrape, a breath catch against the phone's edge. "If you're afraid—" I paused, choosing my words carefully. "I understand. But if you want to be free from someone who bends reality, today is your first step." "Brent will be angry," Kara whispered. "Anger is his profession." "Truth is the court's," I said softly. "Do you still have the recording from that family meeting? The one where they brought papers for me to sign?" "You had your phone on the table," Kara gasped. "How did you know?" "Because I heard the faint beep from your phone that day." I smiled, though she couldn't see it. I was a court clerk for 20 years. I recognize sounds others think are wind. Kara's breathing quickened. "I still have it, but I'm scared." "Fear is normal," I said. "Courage means doing it while you're scared." This time, the silence stretched longer. I heard her walk toward a window, a latch lifting. I could picture it all: the glass pane, the salt air, her hair loose and tired. "I'll send you Victoria's email," I said. "Send the files when you're ready." "Not for me. For you," Kara whispered. "For me." I hung up, my hands still warm from the cup of tea. Outside, the sky had brightened by a shade. Some mornings, light doesn't come from the Sunday. At 10, I met Victoria at her office. Everything there was the flat table, the straight chairs, the neat stacks of documents. Order, the thing that helps people breathe amid chaos. "Good news," Victoria said, looking up, her eyes bright. "Kara sent 3 files: the recording of the conversation at your house, the text messages where Brent pressured her to make you sign, and photos of the pre-drafted transfer papers." I inhaled sharply, my throat dry as if I'd swallowed air. "But there's more." Victoria placed another folder on the table. "Luis Ortega, the Bayview building manager, is ready to testify. He was on duty the day Brent caused a scene in the lobby. He has the security footage and an internal report stating Brent threatened to call the police to arrest his mother-in-law for kidnapping his wife." I closed my eyes briefly. Grateful for people who quietly do what's right. And there's something else. Victoria flipped a page. "An unexpected witness reached out, Mrs. Patel, your neighbor. She said she overheard Kara and Brent forcing you to sign when they brought a lawyer." "Mrs.?" Patel recorded the license plate of the man posing as an attorney. "Turns out he's a mobile notary, not a licensed lawyer." I laughed, this time warm and full. When the wicked grow too confident, they trip on their own strings. Victoria tilted her head, watching my laughter rise like a kite. We have a full chain of witnesses now. But the center is still Kara. I'll file for witness protection. Greer may try intimidation tactics. I want to send Kara a line, I said. Just one. You owe your courage to no one but yourself. I'll deliver it. Victoria nodded. That afternoon we held a prep video meeting with Kara. She appeared on screen, hair loosely tied, dark circles under her eyes, voice low. I'm Victoria, my lawyer said slowly, clearly, each word laid like a brick. No one will pressure you. We'll simply walk through the truth, moment by moment, word by word. Kara nodded, hands clasped tightly on the table. That day, she began, her voice trembling, Brent told me, don't go soft. Your mom just needs to sign. The house is too big, she'll hurt herself eventually. I asked how he knew. He said, trust me. And I did. Do you still have that message? Victoria asked. Yes, here. And here's the recording. Kara opened a file. A faint beep played, then Brent's clipped, cold voice. Just sign. If she doesn't, we'll file for a competency review. Kara lifted her eyes, tears brimming. I stood there. I didn't protect her. No one can protect anyone when they're being manipulated, Victoria said gently. Today, you start protecting yourself. I looked at my daughter through the screen. Kara, I don't need your apology. I need your honesty. That's all. Kara nodded, slower, steadier. I'll testify. Those 3 words dropped like an anchor. I felt the ship inside me finally reach harbor. That evening, while watering the hydrangeas, a black car stopped in front of the gate. Brent. I set the watering can down, wiped my hands on my apron, and stepped onto the porch. We need to talk, he said through clenched teeth. Right here on the porch will do, I replied. He glanced around, wary of neighbors. You think you've won? Greer's ready to strike back. You'll be painted as a manipulative old woman. I tilted my head. An old woman manipulating herself? He didn't smile. Kara won't testify. Why not? I asked. Because you taught her to fear her own voice? Brent stepped up a stair. If she takes the stand, I'll expose everything. Credit debt, her sudden resignation, her therapy records. She won't survive the press. Ah, I sighed. Another man who thinks the press is his magic wand. He leaned forward. I'm not joking. Neither am I said evenly. Go ahead, attack a woman for seeking therapy for anxiety. See how the world responds. And when you mention her credit debt, include how you, the primary cardholder, froze her account every time she disobeyed you. Brent froze. 2 seconds. 3. The vein at his temple throbbed. Leave my porch, Brent, I said, lowering my voice just enough for him to hear. Kara has started choosing herself. You can't stop that. He stepped back, eyes scanning the door, the flowers, searching for a crack. There was none. He turned, slammed the car door, and left a faint smell of burnt rubber behind. I went back to water the rest of the hydrangeas. Droplets clung to the leaves, small and luminous. A piece so simple it felt almost extravagant. At 9 that night, Victoria called. Update. Greer just sent a warning letter. If Kara testifies, they'll petition for a psychological evaluation to undermine her credibility. I paused before replying. Then we'll pre-file the witness protection request. And, Victoria, I have an idea. I'm listening. Let's invite an unexpected witness, HR director from Brent's company. As a major shareholder in Seabright Holdings, I can legally request an ethics check on management. They'll know about his internal emails, maybe ones showing sexist remarks or unethical KPIs. I don't want to destroy anyone. But if they want to turn the court into a theater, we'll flood it with light. On the other end, Victoria was silent for a moment, then let out a quiet laugh. You always surprise me, Mrs. Elaine. All right. I'll take that route. Legal, clean, precise. One more thing, I added. Luis Ortega. Have him appear in person, not through the lawyer. Honest eyes can be more powerful than any number. Understood, Victoria said, jotting notes. The day after tomorrow, the second pre-hearing. I want Kara present. Will you sit beside her? I won't let go of her hand, I replied. Late that night, I sat at the desk and opened Mr. Tran's letter. This time, I didn't cry. I simply read aloud 2 lines. You don't need anyone's signature for the right to live. If one day they make you believe you have nothing left, open this safe. I closed the letter and turned off the light. In the darkness, I saw more clearly than ever the outline of a coming courtroom and the figure of a woman standing tall at its center, not shouting, yet strong enough to make the gavel pause mid-air. Thursday morning, Kara will walk into the pre-hearing room beside me and Victoria. Across from us will be Greer with a thick envelope in his hand. I don't know what's inside. I only know that when my daughter speaks, the scales will tremble. When someone uses fear to silence you, remember this. Truth doesn't need to scream, it just needs to be repeated, clearly and calmly. Because some days, courage is only 3 words. I will testify. That morning, Monterey broke into sunlight after days of rain. Light pierced through the trees, laying gold bands across the stone steps of the courthouse. I arrived early, not because I feared being late, but because I wanted to feel this place once, the gloss of polished wood, the click of high heels, the low murmur of stories seeking justice. Victoria arrived right after me, carrying a thick file. Kara followed, in a pale blue dress, hair loose. Watching my daughter step out of the car, I saw her trembling but not hiding. That alone made my heart bloom in quiet. "Are you all right?" Victoria asked. "I used to pour coffee in these hallways," I smiled. "The only difference now is I no longer carry a tray for anyone." Across the room, Brent and his attorney, Thomas Greer, were already seated. Greer wore another expensive suit, his eyes sharp as a scalpel. Brent kept his head down, but the hand on his knee was shaking. I recognized it. The most cowardly are often the most afraid when faced with silence. The judge overseeing the pre-hearing entered and tapped the gavel lightly. "This is a session to verify initial statements and evidence from both parties. Plaintiff, Mrs. Elaine Tran. Defendant, Mr. Brent Walters. Counsel may proceed." Victoria stood. Her voice was calm, every word clear. "Your Honor, we submit an audio recording, text messages, and witness statements confirming coercion in an attempted illegal transfer of property. We also submit supplemental evidence from witness Kara Walters, the plaintiff's daughter." A soft rustle rose at the back of the room. Kara gripped her hands and drew a breath. Greer glanced at her, then smirked. "Granted," the judge said. Victoria signaled. I looked at Kara. She stood, each step slow, like someone walking on water. Her voice shook, but it was clear. "My name is Kara Walters. I submit an audio recording from March 14th, my husband, Brent Walters, and I went to my mother's home to make her sign the transfer of the Monterey house." Greer shot to his feet. "Objection. The recording was made without consent and violates privacy." Victoria remained composed. "California law permits a recording when the recorder is the party being acted upon in the transaction. Here, miss." Kara was coerced into participating. The judge nodded. Overruled. Victoria pressed play. The room was filled with a faint sound. Brent's voice was cold even, each word like a box cutter. "Sign it. This house is too big for your mother. If she refuses, I'll work with a lawyer to have her assessed for competency. Do you want to see your mother in a psychiatric facility?" The courtroom went dead silent. Kara lowered her head, tears falling. I bit my lip, gripping the chair, my fingers turned cold. The judge wrote something, then looked up. "Mr. Walters, your response?" Brent forced a smile, his voice hoarse. "I was joking. I did not mean it." Victoria stepped in. "If that was a joke, it was a criminal one. We also have the threatening text messages from the same day." She placed a phone on the table, on the screen. "Brent, if your mother does not sign, I will prove she is insane. Kara, please do not do that." "Brent, I am doing this for our future. Keep quiet." Greer cut in, his tone flat as cold steel. "Your Honor, my client is under psychological stress. Mrs. Elaine is leveraging her financial position to turn her daughter against her husband." Victoria did not blink. "Then why do all the threats come from the husband?" The judge raised a hand. "Order, miss." Kara, Do you have anything to add? Kara lifted her head. Her voice trembled, but each word burned like a line of fire. I stayed silent because I thought that was love. But if love turns a person into a bully, I do not want that love anymore. She turned to me. I am sorry, Mom. The room held its breath. I smiled, just enough for her to see. I did not need to speak. Sometimes motherhood is only a nod of forgiveness and encouragement. Greer shifted tactics. He stood and paced slowly around the table, his voice low, aimed at the softest parts of a listener. Miss Kara, you have a history of postpartum depression, correct? You took a 6-month leave. You have undergone therapy. Can we trust your testimony? The courtroom buzzed. Kara blanched. I rose before Victoria could speak. Your Honor, I object. My voice was soft but firm. Mental illness does not make anyone less truthful. It only proves she lived too long in fear. The judge nodded, stern yet warm. Objection noted. Proceed. Greer clicked his tongue, then said, Mrs. Elaine, do you think dragging your daughter into court and making her testify is the action of a good mother? I met his gaze. No, I did not drag anyone. I opened a door so my daughter could step into the light. In that moment, Greer fell silent. Brent kept his head down, his hands still clenched. When the session recessed, Kara came to me. Mom, I thought I would fall apart, but saying it out loud made me lighter. I touched her shoulder. Truth is always light, Kara. Only lies are heavy. Victoria joined us, pride glowing quietly in her eyes. You did well. Kara did even better. I nodded. Now we wait for their strike. She sighed. Greer just submitted that envelope to the court as called rebuttal evidence. I have not seen it yet, but it is likely anonymous letters or personal information they dug up. He wants to attack your image. I smiled and sipped cold tea. Let him dig. People dig only when they know they are standing below. That evening, Victoria called back. I reviewed Greer's envelope. It is an old photo of you from your court clerk days, taken with a male judge. The caption reads, Special relationship influencing future judgment. Clearly, they are trying to fabricate a narrative. I laughed. I remember that photo. It was Judge Morales's retirement party. If they want that game, they will soon learn I have nothing to hide. What do you plan to do? Victoria asked. I will not deny anything. I will tell the truth, and I have a memory they do not expect. What is it? Judge Morales was once my intern. I taught him how to write his first case memo. If this case proceeds to trial, he will be the one on the bench. Victoria went quiet. Mrs. Elaine, are you sure? I looked out the window. The Monterey night was clear as glass. I have never been more sure. Justice is sometimes simply meeting again the person who remembers being treated with kindness. Tomorrow, the formal hearing will open. Greer will throw everything he has, and on the bench will be David Morales. When he lifts his head and recognizes me, the whole room will hold its breath. And the only question left will be this: will my past save me or undo me? Some truths must be spoken even when you are trembling, because only when you stand up will others dare to do the same. That morning, the sky over Monterey was so blue it almost didn't look real. I arrived at the courthouse early, holding a cup of mint tea as I always did, not out of thirst but to steady myself. The glass door reflected my image, a silver-haired woman whose shoulders were still straight. Victoria walked beside me, arms full of thick files. Mrs. Elaine, the local media will be here today. I've requested no live filming, but they're allowed to take notes. I'm not afraid of the light, Victoria, I said calmly. I only fear the shadows people cast with lies. Across the aisle, Brent and Greer had arrived. They were flanked by 2 young men in suits, likely PR or Seabright staff. Brent looked at me briefly, then looked away. In that glance, there was no confidence left, only the exhaustion of someone who had burned too many bridges. The gavel struck. The court will now hear the case of Elaine Tran versus Brent Walters on allegations of unlawful coercion to sign property transfer documents. When the judge entered, the room's air seemed to crystallize. Judge David Morales. I didn't need to see his nameplate. His voice was enough. Deep, Slightly hoarse, the same tone he'd used decades ago when he first asked me, "Miss Elaine, which words make justice real?" Our eyes met. For a heartbeat, there was no courtroom, only memory. Then he nodded, not in favoritism, but recognition. Greer began. "Your Honor, my client, Mr. Walters, had no intent to seize assets. His only concern was the safety of his mother-in-law, who has shown signs of emotional instability since her husband's passing. We have records proving that Mrs. Tran sought psychiatric counseling and was prescribed sedatives for 2 years. A murmur rippled through the room. I could hear Kara's breathing tighten behind me. Victoria rose, eyes steady on her papers. "Your Honor, my client sought therapy after the loss of her husband, a perfectly normal act for someone of her age and circumstance. And I have evidence to the contrary. Brent Walters exploited his wife's financial dependency, deliberately isolating her from her mother to create control." Greer smirked. "That's an unfounded accusation." "It's found," Victoria replied crisply. "An internal email from Seabright Holdings, written by Mr. Walters himself, states, 'She's fragile. I can make the mother believe she needs guardianship.' This evidence has been verified by Seabright's HR department." The room erupted. Brent's face drained of color. I saw Greer stiffen, then lean over to whisper urgently to his client. Judge Morales tapped his gavel. "Order." Victoria continued. "Finally, Your Honor, we call our witness, Mrs. Elaine Tran." I stood and walked to the stand. Each step echoed lightly but firmly against the floor. "Mrs. Tran," Judge Morales said, "are you prepared to testify?" "I've been ready for a long time," I replied, just waiting to be asked. A soft chuckle rippled through the back of the room, then silence. I recounted everything the night Kara and Brent brought the papers, the threats, my husband's letter, and the steel safe in the basement. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I simply spoke, like reading an old chapter that still smelled faintly of ink. Then I stopped and turned toward Greer. "Your Honor, opposing counsel called me unstable. Perhaps he's right in his own way. Unstable because trust was betrayed. Unstable because a mother watched her daughter be manipulated. But if that's instability, I'm proud of it, because that instability is what brought me here today." A small round of applause broke out, quickly silenced by Judge Morales's gavel. He didn't look at me, but I saw the corner of his mouth lift like a teacher watching a former student pass her test. Greer stepped forward, cross-examining. "Mrs. Tran, you once had a personal relationship with a member of the court system, specifically Judge Morales, did you not?" The room froze. I looked at him, steady. "Yes, I taught him how to write his first case memo," Greer faltered, not expecting me to admit it so easily. "And you don't believe that compromises the integrity of this trial?" "I believe fairness doesn't live in memory but in conscience," I said. "If Judge Morales were biased, he wouldn't have dared look me in the eye this morning." The judge tapped the gavel softly, his voice rough but firm. "Mrs. Tran is correct, and to avoid any appearance of bias, I will make this entire proceeding publicly available. Justice does not fear the light." The recording devices clicked on. The courtroom fell silent. Greer lowered his tone. "Mrs. Elaine, what do you really want from this? Money? Reputation?" I shook my head. "Just one thing, for the truth to be called by its right name." During recess, I sat in the hallway where sunlight filtered through glass onto the white tile floor. Kara came and took my hand. "Mom, I never knew what justice smelled like, but today I think I do." I smiled, squeezing her hand. "Justice has no scent, darling. It's like air, you only know you have it when it's clean." That afternoon, the verdict came. The court rules in favor of the plaintiff. All contested assets are confirmed to be the lawful property of Mrs. Elaine Tran. Mr. Brent Walters is fined and ordered to withdraw from all related accounts. Furthermore, the court notes evidence of witness intimidation and orders a separate investigation into attorney Thomas Greer. The final sentence sent the room into a roar. Greer slumped in his chair, pale. Brent hung his head, hands trembling. Kara wept openly. I didn't feel triumphant. Only a fog lifting from my chest, years of pressure finally released into breath. Judge Morales stood, raising the gavel one last time. Justice is not for revenge, it exists so people can go on living. I looked at him and nodded. Amid the camera flashes, I caught his eyes, older, heavier, but still the same mentor. And in that gaze, I saw something small and precious. He remembered my name. That evening back home, the wind rustled through the hydrangeas. I stood on the porch, watching the sky slowly turn rose. A text arrived from an unknown number. You've won. But winning justice doesn't mean winning family. I read it, then deleted it, not out of disdain, but because I no longer needed to keep what wasn't real. Tonight, Kara will stay over for the first time in months. On the table, I set 2 cups of tea, 2 small apple tarts, and my husband's letter between them. Tomorrow, I will open it with my daughter and read to the last line together. Happiness doesn't come from holding someone close, but from learning you no longer need to. Sometimes justice doesn't fall with a gavel, but rests quietly in the gaze of 2 people who have lived through truth, through mistakes, and still choose to stand. The house in Monterey was built for 4 people. Now it was just me and Kara. The morning after the trial, sunlight slipped through the shutters and fell across the embroidered daisy tablecloth Mr. Tran once brought home from Kyoto. On the table, his letter still lay beside 2 cups of tea, faintly warm. Kara walked around the room, her eyes full of both recognition and disbelief, as if seeing her own childhood through a layer of dust. "Are you going to stay here, Mom?" she asked softly. I looked toward the bay, where Mr. Tran's small boat used to rest. "No, I've held on to this place long enough. This house belongs to memory. I want the rest of my life to belong to the wind." Kara sat down beside me. "You're going to sell the house?" I nodded. "Not for money, for freedom. Keeping it means keeping the wound. Selling it means accepting that I've healed." She took my hand and smiled gently, eyes glistening. "I think I understand. Dad would be happy." That afternoon I called Victoria. "I want to authorize the sale of the house. The entire amount will be divided into 3 parts. A scholarship fund in Mr. Tran's name for law students, a small fund for Kara so she can start over, and the remainder for me to go somewhere new." "Have you chosen where to go?" Victoria asked. "I think Savannah. I've heard there are small cottages there, magnolias blooming year-round, and people believe the wind there knows how to keep secrets." Victoria laughed on the phone. "That sounds like a line from a novel, but I think you'll make it real." "Thank you, Victoria," I said. "Not just for the case, but for teaching me that calmness can be a weapon too." "You taught me the opposite," she replied. "That justice doesn't have to be rigid, can smell like mint tea." We both laughed. The following week, the house opened for its first showing. The real estate agent was a silver-haired woman, around my age. She walked in, looked around, and said quietly, "This house feels safe," as if it knows when to stay silent. I smiled. Maybe because it's seen silence turn into strength. 2 days later, the buyers arrived as a young couple, both teachers from Salinas. They didn't bargain. They only asked, "Were you happy here?" I nodded. "I loved and was loved here, but now it needs someone else to light the lamps." The wife squeezed her husband's hand and said, "We promise not to change the curtains. The way light comes through this fabric is beautiful." I signed the papers without regret. When the pen touched the page, it felt like a door closing with a sigh, not a slam. That evening, Kara and I had dinner on the porch. The wind from the bay carried salt and hydrangea in equal measure. Kara said, "I got the new job, Mom, at the Community Legal Center. They need someone to handle financial abuse cases. I told them your story, and they asked me to come in." I smiled and placed my hand over hers. That's the best way to thank justice, by turning pain into something useful. "I'm still a little scared," she admitted. "Good," I said. "If you can still feel fear, it means you still have a heart. Only those who've lost theirs think they're always right." She laughed through her tears, then silence, a beautiful the kind we'd lost for years. When Kara fell asleep, I walked the hallway one last time. The wedding photo still hung there, its frame yellowed. I touched it, then took it down and placed it in a small box. I would take it with me not to remember, but to thank the man who taught me a lesson with his whole life. True love doesn't possess, it protects. In the basement, the steel cabinet was empty. I didn't lock it. I left the door open, a quiet message for the new owner. The things that truly matter never need locking. On moving day, I didn't take much. Just a few books, a jade green teapot, and the handwritten note from Mr. Green Teapot. Tran, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer beside you, but I believe the sky will know how to hold you. I folded it and tucked it into my coat pocket. The car pulled away from Monterey in the late afternoon. Through the window, I watched the hydrangeas sway in the wind, the roof shrink, until the house became only a glimmer of sunlight on the green horizon. I didn't look back, not because I didn't care, but because I had already seen enough. 3 weeks later, I arrived in Savannah. The city smelled of ocean and old wood. People greeted each other with real smiles. I rented a small white cottage with a picket fence and magnolias blooming in front. On the first morning there, I brewed tea and opened the window. Sunlight poured through the curtains like honey, and the breeze carried a trace of salt. An elderly neighbor waved. In Savannah, she said, people come to forget the past and somehow find themselves again. I smiled and replied, I think I've already started. That afternoon, I received an email from Victoria. Subject, case closed. The message read, Brent accepted the ruling. Greer is under investigation for professional misconduct. I just wanted you to know I've never seen anyone win so beautifully. I read it, took a sip of tea, and looked up at the Savannah sky turning color. In that moment, I realized true victory isn't when others lose, but when you stop fighting your own fear. Cliffhanger, tomorrow, I'll go to the bay. My neighbor says there's a small bridge where people write their wishes on slips of paper and release them into the wind. I don't yet know what I'll write, only that this time, it will begin with 2 words. Begin again. Maybe all of us have a house that once felt safe but slowly became a cage. And if one day you're brave enough to sell your old memories to buy a new sky when you truly begin again. The first morning in Savannah, sunlight poured through the window like liquid honey, spreading across the table where a cup of mint tea still sent up soft curls of steam. I opened the door and the ocean breeze rushed in, carrying the scent of salt and the cry of seagulls, gentle yet enough to make me smile. The little cottage was quiet, only the clock ticking in slow, steady beats, and the distant sound of waves reminding me that time was still moving, but this time I wasn't being pulled by it. I was living inside it. On the table lay an envelope, neatly placed, Kara's handwriting. I opened it. The strokes were softer than before, as if each word had been written with calm and honest breath. Mom, I've reread everything Dad ever wrote to you. Now I understand why you stayed silent. I want you to know that I'm learning how to live without fear, just like you. Victoria and I have started a small fund called Silver Keys. It provides free legal advice for middle-aged women who have been financially manipulated. You were right, Mom. Justice doesn't need to shout. It just needs someone calm enough to open the right door. I set the letter down, my hand trembling slightly. Not from emotion, but from the sudden realization that everything I had once lost was returning in a different form. That afternoon, I walked along the bay. Magnolias bloomed white on both sides of the path. An elderly woman sat painting the landscape. When she saw me pause, she smiled. In Savannah, she said, people come to forget their past and somehow end up finding themselves again. I replied, maybe I just did. We sat together watching the ripples move across the water. She asked, where did you come from? Monterey, I said. I just sold my house. Oh, she laughed, her eyes narrowing kindly. And what did you buy instead? I thought for a moment, then answered, the sky. She laughed louder, setting down her brush. Good, because the only thing no one can take from you is the sky above your head. That night, when I came home, I turned on the warm kitchen light and brewed another cup of tea. The light reflected softly off the cream-colored walls, making the small room glow as if someone were telling a story. On the table was an old photograph, me, Mr. Tran, and a young Kara. I looked closer and saw that his smile was still there, a smile that didn't need sound. I took a small sheet of paper and wrote quickly, Savannah, June. I've learned not to lock the door before I sleep. I still brew tea with the same old pot, but now its taste is freedom. I slip the note into the frame, as if sending a letter backward through time. The next morning, I went to the small bridge where people released their wishes. The wind from the sea blew strongly, carrying salt and damp wood. Everyone there held a piece of paper. A young woman wished for forgiveness. An older man with silver hair wished for someone's return, and I wrote 3 words: I am enough. I folded the paper, tied it with a silver string, and let it go into the wind. It lifted, spun a few times, then disappeared into the open air. Not gone, but merged into something larger. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. In the wind, I could almost hear Mr. Tran's voice. I left you all this, not just so you'd be safe, but so you'd be free. And for the first time in years, I didn't cry. I simply smiled softly, truthfully. That afternoon, I received a message from Victoria. I just saw the local news. They're calling you the woman who softened justice. I think they're right. I replied. Justice doesn't need to be hard. It only needs to be fair. She sent back an icon of a silver key. I looked at it and smiled. In life, there are doors that take half a century to open, and when you finally do, you realize it's not a dark hallway beyond, but a garden full of light. That night, I sat down to write the final lines in the one I titled, Begin Again. I wrote, I didn't defeat anyone. I just stopped losing to myself. I once thought aging was the final chapter, but it's only the quiet pause before the next one begins. If you're listening to this, don't be afraid to start over. Whether you're 40, 60, or 75, you still have the right to unlock your own life. I set the pen down and looked up. Through the window, the savannah sky shimmered with stars. One of them shone brighter than the rest, perhaps where Mr. Tran was watching from. I lifted my cup of tea and whispered, My love, I've begun again. And this time, I don't need magic, just myself. Ending. I left the window open. The night wind swept in, carrying the scent of salt and magnolia. The little house seemed to breathe, as if it too had come alive again. In the distance, the waves rolled steadily, not fierce, not loud, just the calm rhythm of someone who had walked through the storm and chosen to stay for the sunrise. If this story touched you, leave a note and don't forget to subscribe to the next journeys of Begin Again stories. Because you are not a burden. You are not finished. And no one has the right to lock you away and call it love.